So your standard retreats, your hiking and yoga, you're combining both activities, but they're both in a lot of ways very different practices. Um, what's the magic that brings these two together? How does it work?
think so. I think they're both very mindful exercises. They're both very. Hiking can be an amazing way of decompressing, of switching off, of you know being present, of being in nature. And I think those are things that yoga teaches you as well in a different way. In addition, I mean, so I think there's a kind of psychological, mental side, but there's also the physical side because, when you've been hiking all day, yoga is a great practice to kind of unwind and to open up your shoulders and your chest and release your low back. So I think the two together for me, ultimately, Chili, I sell what I do. I found that I really, really liked the combination. I found, the yoga really helps with the hiking, and they're both different ways of decompressing. So, it's sometimes for me, a hike is very much like a meditation. It's kind of, I probably get more into a flow state on a hike sometimes than I do in a seated meditation. So I think that for me is a nice kind of, and, there also, I think there are a lot of people whose minds are so busy that, perhaps a seated meditation can be really hard. So that's where hiking can kind of provide that place sometimes. And
I think the being out in nature, moving in nature. I was going to talk about why you believe movement and physical challenge is great for transformation, but you've kind of alluded on that already. Um, but just being in nature and moving in nature, we don't necessarily have to be sitting still. Sometimes sitting still is not always the best thing for our brain, for our mind, our wellness. Um, do you want to elaborate further on it?
I think going just the concept of moving in nature, it's also like the tactile element of it. That often where we'll be somewhere where we pick fruits, in Piglia in October, it's literally Piglia and the amount of fruits we pick there is kind of unbelievable. This year I've picked wild strawberries, cherries, apricots, apples, walnuts, kumara, strawberry tree, wild greens, mustard seeds, you name it. We've picked it, capers. And it's just that kind of, it's moving in nature, but it's also interacting with nature that kind of, I think, takes us away. It brings you into a different space. And there's something so simple about it, but so pure and so beautiful. I think that's one thing I forgot to mention that I'm not going to go too deep into, but movement for me is play. So play is a state where we're not thinking about an outcome. Play is a state where you don't, if you give a kid a toy, they don't ask you how it works. They just play with it. Maybe they don't play with it right, but they just play with it. And this is something that we lose touch with big time. And this is something that we need to, for me, I think, need to get in touch with more. And that is what I find nature does. Nature allows that, whether it's just playing on a beach or whether it's kind of maybe there's a little bit of a rocky section on a hike and you need to get a bit more tactile, whatever it is, it's this disconnecting from the thing of having to know everything and where everything goes and how we do everything. Getting back in touch with a more playful side. That for me is kind of